Is Polaris building a self-driving side-by-side? CFMOTO is working on a closed-cab EV, lots of Massimo news, and we finally get our hands on a 2025 Polaris Expedition ADV. All that and more on this episode of the UTV Driver podcast. You may notice this is a little bit of a different format because Aaron is here in Knoxville in the flesh. Aaron, welcome to Knoxville.
Thanks, bud. It's good to be here.
How was your Thanksgiving?
My Thanksgiving was great, man. We kept it small, just my parents and my father-in-law. It was great. We had a good time.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, it was.
Truly, truly lovely. Ours was also like a pretty low-key thing.
Nice.
Yeah, just us, like, you know, tight little fam situation. It was great.
Love that.
Yeah, super low-key. Well, now that the leftovers are fully digested, it's time to jump into a little bit of recent news, and we are going to start with some fun stuff. Our man Ben Purvis hopped around in the patent office, dug up some pretty cool stuff, including a patent design for a self-driving side-by-side from Polaris. What is going on?
Well, you know, first of all, I think that this is kind of the logical next step, right? Side-by-sides have grown a lot in the last few years. There's a lot of, you know, we're kind of going to, okay, what's the next thing? Self-driving is on the tip of everyone's tongue. We've been talking about it for a few years now, and so Polaris is hopping on that train, and it's cool what they're using it for. This thing will park itself on a trailer or in a truck, and I think that's the primary use here.
Will it back a trailer for me?
No, no. As far as I know, it won't. But basically what it does is it uses an array of sensors on the front and rear of the rig, and it can figure out ramp angle and distance and how wide a space is and just park itself in there. And apparently they're working on a phone app where you can, like James Bond with the BMW, you can kind of control it from that. And they're talking about doing one that will respond to hand signals, which I can't see that screwing up at all. But
No.
The TLDR here is that Polaris has been working on self-driving technology. They did this on the military razors for a while. They've done this a bunch of times, and now they're trying to, I guess, work on a way to get it into a civilian consumer role. And yeah, I can't think of a better place to use it than in parking a side-by-side. And it's worth noting that things like drive-by-wire, EFI, electric power steering, all those things have to be present before you can really go with self-driving, because obviously it's all EFI controlled.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The market has been moving that direction, you know, and I'm not just talking about cars in general. You know, every time a manufacturer adds another integrated system, and what I mean by that is like you said, like steer by wire, throttle by wire, brake by wire. Anytime there's anything that controls those systems or that interrupts the sort of chain of command between your appendages and what happens on the machine, that's a chance for, you know, a certain level of manipulation, including control over the vehicle.
Yep.
And while, you know, I get, like, look, we are into side-by-sides because we like to drive. Nobody's talking about putting this stuff on a razor that we know of.
Right.
And I can very much see this sort of technology working as a force multiplier.
Yeah.
So, like, one dude being able to do the job of two dudes, right? So imagine, like, spraying a fence line, and you're just able to tell your ranger, hey, follow this fence until it comes to a stop while I'm in the passenger seat spraying this thing. Like, that would be deeply, deeply useful. Or, you know, you've got a training ring for horses, and, you know, the thing needs to be groomed. You punch the button on your app and say, hey, do circles in this thing until everything's skookum. That would be pretty handy.
Yeah, and if you don't have physical barriers for the sensors to look at, I can see a world where you can use GPS. You know, if you've got
like
ride command or something in there, it can geofence.
Yeah, that's smart.
And follow a parameter that way. So anyway, there's literally endless possibilities for this. The patent is pretty detailed. You got to go on our website and check out the full story. We're not going to go through every detail of it here, but this is a really exciting thing. I can't wait to see what Polaris uses it for. I guess the disclaimer is, you know, these are patent drawings. That doesn't mean that this is anywhere close to coming to market. It just means that Polaris has had the idea and they want to make sure that they get their IP locked in before anyone else tries to swoop in and take it from them. So you may or may not see it in the future, but we're stoked that they're even thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, Polaris, if you're listening, do this. Like,
Yeah,
it makes
do
perfect
it.
sense. Just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that wasn't the only patent that we looked at
No.
over the past week or so. Purvis also dug up some interesting stuff from CFMOTO. We saw a smaller 2-seat side-by-side, an EV with interchangeable battery packs. That's super cool. They also, and I think this is the thing that we're more interested in, a larger closed cab EV.
Yeah, and this is really cool because basically the floor of the EV is the battery. The battery doubles as the floor, which means all that weight is now way down low.
Perfect.
And you don't have like an engine box, right? You can just have the entire interior be wide open because I mean the battery essentially is what powers it. You know, there's a couple of motors on either end for the four-wheel drive system, so it's super space efficient without you really needing to get creative. And so that is super cool. It's very cool to see yet another manufacturer coming out with an EV. I know you guys are probably sucking your teeth and gasping about gasoline, and the reality is EVs are coming whether you like it or not. And every time a new manufacturer takes it upon themselves to start designing a new EV, that means that the technology gets closer and closer and closer to being mature, and that means that these things will make more and more sense as they come out. You know, this is all development work.
Yeah, and look, we ranted and raved about the Ranger Kinetic a little while ago, and for good reason. In my opinion, that's the best Ranger they make. It's quiet, it's fast, it's efficient. All those things are awesome. You're dead right when it comes to packaging, right? The biggest constraint about how you can use space inside of a side-by-side is the fact that you have this massive power unit that sits basically over the rear wheels. So all that space is sucked up with just nothing, just heat and noise. And speaking of noise, these things sort of take care of my biggest complaint with most side-by-sides, which is the fact that they sound like garbage.
Yeah.
All of them sound like a sick Dyson vacuum.
Yeah.
So, if you can get that stuff out of the way, make it quiet, make it powerful, I'm 100% here for it.
And think about how good the stereo would be in this thing if you're not fighting the noise of an engine. Like it or not, side-by-sides are not particularly well sound insulated, even if they're enclosed. And so we have myriad examples in the OEM world of stereos that have huge wattage, and all that is to overcome the din from the side-by-side. And they don't, some of them are pretty good when you're standing still, but most of them don't have great audio quality when they're up and running. I feel like this would take care of that.
It makes sense that we're seeing this from CFMOTO specifically, because China has a pretty massive EV industry already. And we mentioned this on the Ranger Kinetic episode, but Ford spent some time just driving, Ford CEO Jim Farley spent a bunch of time just driving various Chinese EVs. And he said they were light years ahead of us just in terms of like development and how nice the vehicles are. So, if companies in China already have the battery technology figured out and the motor technology figured out, it makes perfect sense that CFMOTO would hit us there.
Yep, and not to mention that means that the battery packs are primarily made in China, which means that the factory that makes the batteries is literally next door to the factory that builds the side-by-sides. That's going to drive costs down.
Yeah.
If you don't have to ship a few tons of batteries across the ocean to install them here, that knocks down all the costs. So, CFMOTOs are inexpensive anyway, and this is one reason why. It also is worth noting that they're talking about an enclosed 2-door side-by-side and an enclosed 4-door side-by-side that are both EV. There's no hybrid technology mentioned in the patents, and
the drawing looks like an Expedition.
I was just going to say
it looks
that.
exactly like an Expedition.
Yep.
So this, and who knows, right? Like the manufacturers use sort of different patent drawings to sort of throw people off the case all the time.
Yeah.
So like auto manufacturers are famous for this. They'll patent something, and in the drawing it will be in like a 2-door coupe, and it turns out it's for a pickup truck.
Right.
So who knows exactly what this is going to show up in, and it's possible that CFMOTO is crossing a bunch of things off the list at the same time. So maybe they want to build a closed cab side-by-side. Maybe they want to build an EV, and instead of having 2 patents for 2 different things, they just crammed all this stuff together, and Bob's your uncle.
Well, and an EV is a power unit, right? So you could put it in a sport side-by-side, you could put it in a something like the Expedition, and the point is now you've got the patent already taken care of. We should also mention maintenance costs and longevity.
Dude. The true joy of an electric motor is there are a handful of moving parts.
Yep.
We have figured out how to make internal combustion engines run for a very long time. But the more parts you have, and an internal combustion engine is just a bunch of parts, the larger the chances are for failure, right? So an EV, you don't have valve adjustments.
Nope.
You don't have an oil change interval. You don't have all the sort of stuff, spark plugs, spark plug wires, coil packs, like all that stuff that goes into keeping a machine going for years and years and years. you just don't have to mess
Right.
with.
Yep. You've got what, tires and suspension?
Yeah, tire suspension. You might have coolant if it's a water cooled battery system,
Right.
or a water cooled motor. But otherwise, that's
Nope.
pretty much it.
So no indication when we're going to see this thing on sale yet. Again, it's a patent. Who knows when it might show up. But again, it's exciting to see somebody working on it, and it's exciting to know that CFMOTO is expanding their scope in side-by-sides.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody sort of, for a long time, sort of wrote off these manufacturers like CFMOTO as sort of copying what everybody else was doing. And they've established so much market share.
Yep.
They're like the fourth largest manufacturer, side-by-side manufacturer globally. They finally have the resources to sort of start poking around on the edges and figuring out what they want to do next. And this is what it looks like.
Well, we've said this a million times. This is sort of like, reminds me of the early days of the car industry where, Dodge Brothers and Ford and Chevrolet were all building very much the same car. Yeah. And then as they got market share, as they got the money on board to do different things, they started sort of differentiating themselves. And you're seeing that here where CFMOTO, yes, they copied Rangers and Razors for forever and ever, but we saw them come out with a new sport side-by-side this year that didn't look like anything else that they had ever built or anything that anyone else was building. But it had a very specific target market in mind. And this is... I think this is hand in hand with that.
Again, worth saying at a good price point, right?
Yep.
Because as side-by-sides continue to get more complex and more expensive over and over again, they've sort of abandoned that lower price point, which brought a lot of people into the hobby to begin with. So if a brand like CFMOTO is going to make that work, to me, that feels exactly like what Honda did in the 70s and 80s, and it feels like what Hyundai did in the 90s and 2000s. So yeah, makes perfect sense. And anything that can continue to spur Polaris and Can-Am and the big players, I'm here for.
Yep.
So, we're not going to be able to get our hands on that anytime soon, but we did hear some news on some machines that you can get your hands on as soon as next year. Aaron, you been to a Rural King?
I have been to a Rural King.
Dude, one of my favorite stores on the planet.
Yeah, it's like Walmart had a baby with Tractor Supply.
Yeah, and Advanced Auto.
And Advanced Auto.
And a gun store.
Yep.
And, that's about right.
Yeah, just imagine a Cabela's Walmart grocery miasma thing.
With DeWalt and Milwaukee and Crescent Tools and socks.
Yeah.
It's great.
Popcorn.
Popcorn. You need horse medicine. You got that taken care of. You need baby chicks. Got that too. I mean, I swear to God, if every other store on the earth closed and I could only shop at Rural King, I'd probably do it.
Yeah, you'd be happy.
I bring this up because Rural King and Massimo have expanded their partnership.
Oh, okay.
So Massimo's been selling like their little mini bikes and the sort of mini Jeeps at Rural King for a long time. They just signed a new contract where Massimo is going to make its ATVs, UTVs, and golf carts also available at Rural King.
Oh, no way.
Which is cool, right?
Yeah.
Because for a long time, if you didn't have a place in your area that carried these things, you just had to order them online and hope that you liked what you got when it showed up. This, at least, you can go put hands on it. You can sort of see what it's like. If you have issues with the rig, you can bring it back.
Right.
Which is very cool. If you don't have a Rural King in your area, number one, sucks to be you. Number two, that might change soon. Part of this announcement was that Rural King is really going to expand their footprint over the next year.
Oh, okay.
The company said that they opened 5 stores in 2024. They're going to open 15 over the next 13 months. So some pretty serious expansion. So if you don't have a Rural King in your area, you might have one soon.
Yeah, that'd be great because I don't have a Rural King in my area.
We got 2 in Knoxville.
Well, it must be nice, but we don't have a single one in Central Virginia. So I'm looking forward to maybe seeing one in the near future.
Yeah, and Massimo also announced an update to one of their heavy hitters. All right, so this new Buck, what's it look like?
Well, it looks a lot like a previous gen Polaris Ranger, like we just said. It's functionally similar to a 6-seat Can-Am Defender, but the redesign included ABS half doors. It's got a 33 horsepower engine now. It's got touchscreen GPS, and it has new 25-inch tires wrapped around aluminum rims. It's a bargain basement side-by-side, but check this out. It comes in $3,000 cheaper than a base Can-Am Defender. So,
and that's a 3-seat Defender, not a 6-seat.
Yes, this is a 6-seat rig that comes in at $11,999, which is about as cheap as you're going to find.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty unreal in terms of bargain. I mean, I don't think we've ever seen anything come through our doors here that anywhere close to that.
No,
And, like 33 horsepower, I'm not going to set the world on fire by any means, but for a lot of people, if you're just bopping around a small piece of property, more than enough.
Yeah, and I will say this. For one thing, now you'll be able to go down to your local Rural King and put hands on one. And so if you're skeptical about whether it matches up to a Can-Am Defender, well, guess what? Now you can go see for yourself. And if that $3,000 is worth it to you to step up to the Can-Am, there you go. Now you know ahead of time before you spend your hard-earned dollars. And the other thing is, if you look at what some other big box stores put out there as UTVs that are...
UTVs, they're golf carts.
Yeah, and they're $8,500 or $9,000. This is an honest-to-goodness UTV. Again, not the most powerful rig out there, certainly not the most well-appointed, but it's not a golf cart. It is a UTV, and at 12 grand, it's really hard to argue with. So, more power to them.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
In a lot of places, you're hard-pressed to get a solid 4 or 5 year old utility rig for 12 grand, much less a brand new machine.
Right.
So again, like I was saying, as the market continues to trend towards luxury rigs and more cost, it's good to see people sort of, manufacturers filling in the lower rungs. So that's good.
And you can go to Massimo's website and check them out. They'll tell you where your nearest dealer is if you want to go put hands on one, and they are available now.
All right, well, there you go. Okay, so we finally got something fun in the shop here. It's been the thing that I've been waiting on for a long time. It's the thing you know quite a bit about.
Yes.
It's an Expedition ADV.
Yes, we have the 5-seat Polaris Expedition ADV in-house. I'm so excited because I drove this thing almost 2 years ago in Arizona, and I had an absolute blast. The biggest takeaway from that drive was that the side-by-side industry had moved forward a step behind some effort that Polaris had put forward. This thing has a super solid chassis, and there's an enormous amount of room inside. So they went directly at the overlander market with this rig. They saw people cruising around in Toyotas, in lifted Tacomas and kitted out Land Cruisers and all that, and thought, well, there's space for us to get in here. And so basically, you have a UTV that is a little bit smaller than a Jeep Wrangler, length and width. It's heavy. It weighs like 2,800 pounds, but it has HVAC and a stereo and ride command and room for 5 people and all of their stuff, and you can put a rooftop tent on it. I've waxed lyrical about it a ton of times, and Zach has kind of been sitting here.
Well, in my defense, we had the 2-seat version earlier this year. We took it out to Portsmouth Island, North Carolina, had a good time camping out of it, and it performed fine. It's just I didn't really see why you wouldn't necessarily go for something like an RMAX or a General or something along those lines, especially since Yamaha now offers a closed cab option for the RMAX. I think, we're going to take this thing out and wheel around tomorrow and have a good time with it, but I think just having it in the shop now, the 5-seat version makes a lot more sense.
Yes, it really does.
More sense. And I part of that is just how configurable the interior is. So you've got the closed, lockable sort of hatch area in the back. That's awesome. Big glass, hatch access. Yep. That's all great. The seat backs fold down, so you have even more room. So if you've just got 2 dudes and a bunch of camping gear, throw all that stuff in there, you're good to go. The rear seat bench folds up, so if you want to stuff stuff down in there, whether that's guns or coolers or ammo boxes or whatever, it's going to be secure, it's not going to go anywhere down there. It makes a lot of sense. It's really adaptable.
And that rear bench flips 60-40, so you can still have one person in the back seat. And it's worth saying the floor below the bench is completely flat. It's almost as if Polaris thought of this. You can get a lock and ride system for the floor so that you can really strap down a cooler, and it's 28 inches deep. So the rear box is 36 inches deep with the seat back up, and the floor is 28 inches deep. So even if you don't fold the seat backs down, there's a ton of room in this thing.
Well, and we've got the North Star, so HVAC, so both heat and air conditioning, vent, that's great. A banging stereo. There's a subwoofer the size of my chest in the sort of center console, so the thing sounds absolutely great. Speaking of sound, one of my biggest complaints about the 2024 model that we had out at North Carolina was just how loud that thing was inside. And you all have been talking to us and saying that, man, the 2025 is much, much better. I got to be honest, I did not believe you at all. It makes a serious difference. We were driving the thing around here at the shop. When we measured the 2-seat, the 2024, sound levels, it put out like 115, 120 decibels. That is an insane amount of noise. I think that's equivalent to like a loud concert, basically.
Yeah.
So really, if you're in a 2024 model, you should be having hearing protection.
Yeah, it's earplug
even
territory.
if you're wearing the helmet while you're riding.
Yeah.
Ripping around in this 2025 model, 85 decibels inside.
Yeah.
That is a massive cut
Huge.
in noise.
I mean, keep in mind, decibels are like a logarithmic scale, so it's not like a linear path. Yeah, like 85 is way, way quieter than 120.
Yeah. So it makes a massive difference. They've really done their work. Hats off to Polaris. I'm genuinely shocked.
Yeah, it's super impressive too because they wouldn't have put when they put the ADV model out to market, it was loud in there. I talked to some Polaris brass who said, look, we know it's loud in there, but the problem is we're not sure how to make it quieter. You know, it's a huge box with an engine underneath it.
And a lot of glass.
And a lot of glass. So it's a really tough area to quiet down. So I don't know what they did, but it really worked. So hats off to them.
Yeah, I mean, it has a super nice headliner. That certainly helps to soften some of the noise inside. I was thinking, well, maybe it's because the 4-seat, the front passengers are farther away from the engine. It's not true. We threw the decibel meter in the back, and it's just as quiet in the back as it is up front, which is super impressive. I mean, to me, that solves one of my biggest issues with the thing, which is like, okay, well, this is supposed to be an ADV and an overland machine. You're supposed to be able to spend 5-6 hours in this machine. But if it's 120 decibels in there, you don't want to spend 30 minutes in it.
Yep.
Well, this thing is considerably quieter. I can absolutely spend all day in it and have no problems with it.
Yeah, I did spend 5 hours in the previous generation, and it was...
How's the tinnitus?
Yeah, noise was the biggest complaint. Noise was the biggest complaint. So hats off to them. I'm really excited to let you get out and rip around in it tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, the initial impressions, okay? 114 horsepower... 2,700 pounds? 2,800?
2,800 pounds dry. That's without fuel, without anything.
She feels a little sluggy.
Yeah.
And again, like, this isn't a sport rig. I should be entirely clear. This isn't... It's sort of like a dual sport rig, which it's not just like a go out and go as fast as you can. My biggest issue... I keep saying biggest issue. I have many biggest issues, side by side to side. The XD1500 exists. A really great 3-cylinder, a steel belt transmission, lots of power, lots of torque. It seems like the perfect power plant for this machine, and that's not what we get in the Expedition.
Yeah, that's true. I will say this. Once you get it up on plane, once you get out onto the trail and you start ripping, it carries momentum well.
Sure.
And that engine is super characterful, and even with all that weight and length to haul around, it doesn't dampen the character too much. So you've got the engine is cool, and it doesn't feel as sluggish once you're up and moving. It feels a little bit more sprightly than it does off the line. But you're absolutely right. And there's another way to cure the noise complaint, right? Like, put that quiet Ranger XD1500 motor in there. That thing is remarkably quiet, even in the rig it's designed to go in. And so this one, it would just make so much sense.
Yeah, that's really what I would like to see in sort of the mid-cycle or even next generation Expedition.
Absolutely.
Make use of that power plant.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I mean, tomorrow it's supposed to be chilly. It's supposed to be 45, 50 degrees by the afternoon. Perfect.
Yeah.
Really,
HVAC,
really
baby.
perfect weather for repping around in a closed cab rig. So
Absolutely.
it should be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I believe that brings us to the end of episode 4. That is a wrap for this week. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to like and subscribe, share it with your friends, comment, tell us what you think. Would you buy an Expedition? Would you buy a Buck? Have you ever been to Rural King, and how's the popcorn? I want to hear about it. You can also check us out over at utvdriver.com. We post news, reviews, buyer's guides, galleries, videos, everything you want to know about side-by-sides over there 5 days a week. We're also on all the usual social media channels. Reach out, show us what you're riding. UTV Driver is proudly owned by Octane Lending. When it comes time to buy your next power sports vehicle, be it a motorcycle or a side-by-side, finance your purchase with Octane Lending. We will see you next time.
Later.